And what do we know is definitely happening over here in the UK? Well, we definitely know that our interest rates are going to go up, more than likely. Why? Because this war in the Middle East, amongst oil, crude exporting nations, is going to affect our energy markets. And one of the things that increases our cost of living is energy markets. So we're going to see. Do you know what? Actually, I keep saying inflation is going to go up. I apologize. I think that cost of living is going to go up, and that actually inflation may go down to counterbalance it. I think we're in for a world of hell, is what I'm saying. I'm just, again, trying to do the math again in my head, because it's always counterintuitive what the Bank of England does with the interest rate. They can only control the interest rate on banks. That is all they can control. They cannot control the price of bread. They cannot control the price of oil. They can't control any of that. But if energy goes up, if the price of energy goes up, then we know that the price of imports will go up. Anything that relies on oil to get to our country. And as an island who does not grow everything, we do not grow, we grow apples, but not all of them. We don't grow a lot of our strawberries. We don't grow a lot of most of what we consume. Those prices will definitely go up. And if those things go up, then the interest rate will go, it'll go up to make people save more. It'll go down to make people spend more. It's going to hurt. That's what I know is going to happen. It's going to hurt. I think it's going to go up. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've just had another brain fart where I've been saying up this whole time, and then my brain went, "Are you sure it's up?" And I'm like, "I'm pretty sure it's up. I'm pretty sure it's up in order to calm things down." Because that's right, it is going to go up. It's going to go up to make people save more and spend less, which will make the cost of everything come down. Because companies are not going to keep raising the prices if people aren't buying. And people won't buy if interest rates go up. So they will go up. Well, Shane, I appreciate it nonetheless, and I appreciate you for sharing that joke with us. Thank you so much. I should, in all fairness, also talk about arguments against my reasons for the war, against the belief that it was all caused to distract from the Epstein files because Saudi Arabia wants it, and to avoid de-dollarization. The U.S. claims that this war is a defensive response. That's their argument. It's a defensive response to neutralize an imminent nuclear threat and 47 years of Iranian aggression towards the 1979 hostage crisis, or all of these reasons are like, no, we are being defensive. Given that on the 27th, Oman said, no, they've agreed to follow IAEA nuclear, IAEA to follow the nuclear watchdog. It's a pile of shit, basically. A defensive response, it's a pile of shit, because we were seeing signs of Iran giving in to things, all right, especially after supposedly we bombed all of their nuclear weapons to high heaven back in June anyway. According to Trump himself, we already did that in June and there was nothing left to bomb. And then suddenly there's something to bomb 24 hours after they agree to stop enriching uranium and to follow what nuclear watchdog, says that they want done. Okay. Significant weakening fact. The imminent nuclear threat justification is undermined. Let's be honest. It's undermined by Operation Midnight Hammer having already destroyed their core nuclear program in June 2025. As I just said, I'm repeating myself. I'm rereading my own notes. And B, Iran agreeing to full IAEA verification. One shouldn't joke about that, but every time I see IAEA, I hear it in my head. IAEA, and no uranium stockpiling just 24 hours before the strikes. I just said that. Why are my notes repeating what I just said? Okay. Some would argue, because as we know that there were protests happening, Iran was getting more and more upset. There was a lot of domestic uprising. There were a lot of protests. There were a lot of deaths. But there was a lot of fight back against this particular regime. And so some are arguing that this was a liberation campaign and that they were liberating the people. Except they haven't gotten rid of the regime, have they? They've gotten rid of the head, and like Medusa, another head is growing back. So not convinced by that. It'd be nice if it were true. But I think you need to hear from some of the women in Iran and children in Iran before you believe that any of that is true. Is life... Hi, you're a woman in Iran. Is life better for you? No. Okay, then that was not the reason. The Brennan Center for Justice argues that it could be a power grab argument, like a constitutional power grab. that it's not a geopolitical conspiracy, but a straightforward unconstitutional seizure of executive power designed to allow Trump to declare a national emergency and manipulate the upcoming elections. Interesting. Under this reading, like under this interpretation, that this is actually more about domestic policy in the US, a constitutional power grab, oil and Epstein are incidental. Like, it's not about that. It's just about having a war that can help you argue this is not the time for an election. And it's entirely possible. It's quite early. I mean, the next election isn't for another couple of years. It is quite early, but there are midterms coming up, and his popularity is at an all-time low. It's a major move, but we know for a fact that a country at war doesn't like to change regimes. We know that. They don't like to change who's at the head of them. Because, let's be honest, we know that Ukraine was due at least one election by now. And it's something that even Zelensky's having to fight. Because some people are going, we'd like an election, please. And he's going, really? Right now, when we're in the middle of this? You want us to organize a free and fair election? So we elections at a time of war have always been a source of contention. But I'm quite happy to concede that this is, again, about distracting from upcoming elections in the same way that I've argued that it's a distraction from the Epstein files. I think one way or the other, yeah, I think we can all agree this is definitely a power grab, that there is definitely power grab motives underneath this. Economic self-harm as another argument against what I've said the reasons are. Somebody has said economic self-harm is actually the reason. A prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz could raise oil prices by 67 to up to 108%, potentially wrecking the global economy recovery and severely damaging Trump's domestic standing. If this were purely a transactional arrangement with Gulf allies, it carries a huge risk for America, which would be an argument against me saying, oh, he's done it for selfish reasons. They're saying there's too much economic self-harm potential as an outcome from this for him to have been that stupid. And then I would say, listen back to yourself. Do you think that there's something that would be too stupid for him to do? Do you think, honestly, there's something that's too stupid? Like, every time he's done something, tariffs or any other reactionary thing that he has done, and we've gone, oh God, that is more stupid than the last thing he did. Oh, that is stupid. Oh my God, that's stupid. So can anything be too stupid? Do you believe that there comes a point where even for Trump something is too stupid? I mean, the economic self-harm that's being caused just by him being unstable and countries like Canada looking at ways to, similarly to BRICS, work around the dollar is economic self-harm. And it's happening in real time. So, here's an interesting one. Analysts at the Stimson Center note that the historical record gives little reason to believe that a bombing campaign can deliver regime change. Strategic bombing has reliably produced solidarity, not rebellion, even when populations fear their leaders. So that says they should have known that bombing Iran wasn't going to give them regime change. And you go, really? Should they have? Wouldn't that have required somebody at the White House somewhere to read something? Say the report from the Stimson Center that said all of this? I mean, they don't read their own laws. They don't read their own laws, as we know from the fact that even the Supreme Court, who is 6-3 generally in Trump's favor, had to knock down some of his tariffs that he introduced through an emergency order because they went, that's not legal. The number of times they're doing things that are just not legal. Pam Bondi, just answering any question on anything ever, demonstrating how little she understands about the law. And you want me to believe that there's no reason to suppose that bombings can deliver regime change and they would have known that and therefore not bombed as a result of it? Don't think so. And then lastly, someone said to me, well, a U.S. intelligence report produced the week before the war found that even a large-scale assault on Iran was unlikely to trigger regime collapse. So again, I refer to my earlier argument. You want me to believe that he knew that it wasn't about regime change because he read this U.S. intelligence report. I mean, unless it was written in crayon and was no more than half a page long, I sincerely doubt that that U.S. intelligence report had anything to do with the decision to bomb Iran on the 28th of Feb. Just saying. Just saying. Yeah. U.S. intelligence, James points out, is a little bit of an oxymoron these days, isn't it? Definitely a little bit of an oxymoron. Right before that, James says, they destroyed the uranium enrichment process the last time they claimed, but according to sources, they had rebuilt it. I understand that they'd rebuilt some of it, but not entirely. But this is where we were getting to by the end of January in peace talks, was that they were saying, okay, we're willing to stop this, or we're willing to work with the IAEA to work within acceptable limits. And the IAEA, of course, is a UN body, the nuclear watchdog, the day before they were bombed. So, well, this is a very good point that Mike makes. Now, Mike says the war seems to be keeping Netanyahu in power longer. And it's interesting because I think that there is a certain amount of support in Israel for this particular war, even though the Israeli people are fatigued. They are fatigued and tired of war. They have been at war for a very long time. But you're quite right. We mustn't forget that this was a joint venture, if one can use those two words with regards to a war. This is a joint venture between the USA and Israel is also very involved in the bombing of Iran and the attempted destabilization of that regime. And one can understand why, because of course Iran has been funding groups, including Hezbollah, across the Middle East for a while now, and they'd like that to stop. And that's another thing, is that we also know that a lot of Iran's money was being helped and stored and laundered through Venezuela. So by decapitating Venezuela and now attacking Iran, these are not picked out of a hat. They are very specific countries that are in alliance that have been chosen. The thing that almost doesn't make sense, it would make sense if they were all doing this all to try and weaken Russia, because they are all connected in a way. They've certainly almost strangled Cuba to death, because if you don't know this, if you haven't looked it up, the Cuba's struggling because they've basically stopped all oil going to Cuba, and Cuba's entire infrastructure runs on oil. And it was coming from Venezuela, and now they're saying, no, you can't have that. So Cuba's in a desperate state right now, an absolutely desperate state, because it relies, of course, on Venezuela and Russia. And when you ask Trump about Cuba, he goes, well, when I was a kid, we were always told Cuba was evil, so Cuba is evil. And that's what he's running off of, is a memory from childhood. So you would be forgiven for thinking, well, maybe this is all about Russia. Maybe this is all about Russia, the big evil of the Cold War, U.S. and Russia, this classic 20th century Godzilla versus... Who did Godzilla fight? Who's the big one that Godzilla fought? I don't know. Godzilla versus Godzilla 2. I don't know. Godzilla versus King Kong? Is that a fight? You would say, it was a huge... Godzilla's Japanese, not even U.S. or Superman versus... I don't know a Russian super person. I don't know enough Russian mythology to be able to finish that analogy. But you could argue, is this another proxy war in the U.S. versus Russia fight, except for the fact that Trump keeps complimenting Putin and going, nah, mate, you're fine, in his best Britishy accent, like that. No, I love what you're doing over there, mate. Love what you've done with the place. Love it. Love the power control. Love how you've been in power for years. Oh my God. Can I be honest? I'm exhausted. Let's talk of happier things. Did you know? Let's talk of happier things. That is the war. That is my take on the war. That's what I think is going on. Essentially, in a nutshell, what do I think the war is? I think it's rich men getting richer. That's what I think it is. I think it's rich, evil men getting richer. I think that what we are watching in real time is a real, not trickle up, but what's a big wave called? Tsunami. I think we're not seeing a trickle up. I think we're seeing a tsunami of money going up towards the higher echelons of society that will never come down again if we do not make major changes. if we do not, we are returning, we are in a place of serfdom. We're in a technological serfdom. I've said this before. We are, this is ultimately rich men getting richer. If you go and look up the news stories about Polymarket is allowing people to bet on almost anything, including the war. The war, as I've said, started on the 28th of February. On the 27th of February, 4 accounts opened on Polymarket. They all bet that the war would start on the 28th. The war did start on the 28th. They collected millions, and then they disappeared again. People are making money from this. Do not kid yourselves that this is about anything other than money.